But first, since its inaugural meeting in the Australian capital Canberra in 1989, APEC's role has been to promote freer trade in the Asia-Pacific. At this summit, building shared prosperity is again the goal, but while APEC states are keen to do business, the region's intractable security disputes threaten to derail the trade agenda. Tom Crooks reports.
Russia's eastern port city is gearing up to host the leaders of APEC's 21 member countries.
We've been preparing for this event for quite a while, and the main topic of it, as we know, is the traditional topic for the Asia-Pacific region, the liberalisation of free trade.
The APEC meetings give President Vladimir Putin a strong platform to promote a resurgent Russia to the rest of the world.
There's a big domestic story that Putin's wanting to tell through the summit, and that's about revitalisation of the east in Russia, which has always been underpopulated, has always been under-industrialised, deindustrialised, or Gulag territory. You know, it hasn't got a glorious past.
APEC is supposed to be all about trade and economic cooperation, but overshadowing the conference is one of the key foreign trade proposals from US President Barack Obama. It's known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it's essentially a massive free trade agreement between at least 11 countries, but it's not part of the APEC process.
I think it's an irritant to the discussion. I mean, APEC is meant to be this forum for regional integration throughout the Asia-Pacific, and yet you have these completely separate negotiations going on the side. Every country in APEC is going to be quite aware that there are other countries negotiating this different trade agreement, and it doesn't include two of the biggest members of APEC, that is Russia and China.
And within China, there's a suspicion that the TPP was designed specifically to constrain its economic growth.
Realistically, China can't hope to join the TPP. The TPP is quite unique in that it covers topics quite apart from just getting tariffs to zero. So, for example, it talks about regulatory convergence in areas like intellectual property right protection, labour standards, these sorts of things. These issues are ones that are tough enough for Australia and the US to negotiate, let alone the US and China.
But with a number of regional security disputes on the boil, there's an expectation that the world leaders gathered here will also try to arrange one-on-one meetings to quietly thrash out some solutions.
The maritime disputes in East Asia, they're the things that are right now high temperature that really needs some kind of pressure valve to wind it back. Diplomatically, it's always difficult in these bilateral disputes. Who visits whom, where do you do it, who goes first? Matters of face are quite important in all of this. And that's where a venue like APEC's great, because what can happen if they're smart about it is the Chinese and the Japanese can meet at very senior levels to thrash out some kind of accord, to take the heat out of it, without paying the "we went to China" price, or we went to Japan, or wherever.
And going into the APEC meetings, member states have made no secret of their positions over the various disputes.
The South China Sea issue is about territorial disputes over the Spratly Islands and parts of the waters in the South China Sea. As any other country in the world, China has a responsibility to safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
In previous meetings of other forums, including the ASEAN grouping of nations, Indonesia has tried to play the role of peacemaker to broker a deal over the various disputes in the South China Sea. And at APEC, the diplomatic skills of Indonesian Foreign Minister Martin Elakawa will again be in strong demand. But the one major world leader who won't be there is US President Barack Obama.
It clearly diminishes the prestige of the event. The American president is still the biggest draw card, and particularly as it's Obama, and this is a guy who has a kind of media presence and a media charisma that no one can match on the international stage. But on the other hand, some people will argue by not having that as much of a media circus, you might provide opportunities for a little bit more traction. There's also the opportunity, of course, for the countries that aren't as fond of the US as others to potentially prod the Americans a little bit.
Achieving any major trade or security breakthroughs may be too much to hope for from this round of APEC meetings.
let's face it, economic agreements in themselves are hard to negotiate if we think about the World Trade Organization, Doha Round, or APEC itself. So achieving economic agreements are tough. When you throw security and territorial concerns into the mix, it becomes even more complicated.